Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and today we're going to be talking about the origins of the worship of the Emperor of Mankind. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day. If you have any suggestions, please comment down below. And if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. It is because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the origins of worshipping the Emperor of Mankind. During the Great Crusade, many different religious cults appeared throughout the Imperium of Man, worshipping the Emperor of Mankind as a god. Each one had its own subtle variation and differences in doctrines. These cults and their beliefs were forbidden by the Emperor, who viewed religion and worship as the root of humanity's suffering. Nevertheless, these cults continued to pop up all throughout the Crusade. The strongest of all of the early imperial cults was the Temple of the Savior Emperor. This cult had the advantage over the others in that it was based on Terra, and that its leader had been a successful and respected officer of the imperial army who had fought on Terra during the Horus Heresy, defending the heart of the Imperium. This leader had renamed himself Faticus and had begun to preach his teachings concerning the divinity of the Emperor to anyone who would listen. This faith spread amongst the members of the imperial army and the Armada Imperialis, but also to the lowly scribes and minor adepta of the imperial administration. The faith was then spread by these individuals to other worlds. When Faticus died at the age of 120 Terran years, the temple had more than 1 billion followers on Terra and untold faithful throughout the Imperium Segmentum Solar. In the wake of the chaos and the anarchy of the Horus Heresy, the Temple of the Savior Emperor provided a message of hope and reunification through a common faith. Cults who rejected being absorbed, or who couldn't be absorbed, saw themselves being persecuted by fanatical mobs who preferred the Savior Emperor theology. However, the temple always rejected these violent acts at first. This development culminated in the early 32nd millennium, by which time almost 2/3 of the Imperium's population followed the teachings of the Temple of the Savior Emperor, the only exception being the Space Marines, who had never formally acknowledged the divinity of the Emperor in line with his wishes, and the Adeptus Mechanicus, who had their own worship of the cult Mechanicus. The temple's importance, influence, and power rapidly outmatched any other imperial sect dedicated to emperor worshipping. Another one of the temple's core beliefs became the redemption of humanity through the emperor's self-sacrifice. After a few hundred Terran years, a single church, known as the ecclesiarchy, was formed through the unification of a number of smaller cults within the Temple of the Savior Emperor. And finally, in the 32nd millennium, this cult was recognized as the official state religion of the Imperium, granting it the official government title of the Adeptus Ministorum, and it was incorporated into the Adeptus Terra once the High Lords realized how useful the religion could be in protecting, unifying, and energizing the citizens of the Imperium from the many dangers of the galaxy. Remaining religious cults which differ in their primary theology from the imperial creed taught by the ecclesiarchy were persecuted and mostly destroyed by the first of the wars of faith called upon by the Ministorum. A few centuries later, in the mid-32nd millennium, Ecclesiarch Veneris II received a seat amongst the High Lords of Terra, and after 300 Terran years, this seat was made permanent. The political power of the ecclesiarchy continued to grow, increasing its hold over the minds and beliefs of the imperial citizenry. Those who would not follow its teachings were declared unbelievers or heretics. They were ostracized and on occasions even executed. The vast interstellar territories of the Imperium were organized into dioceses. They were led by the ecclesiarch's cardinals. These powerful religious and political figures were responsible for the missionaries and preachers of hundreds of worlds. Lavish shrines, impressive temples, and majestic cathedrals dedicated to the Emperor of Mankind were built throughout the Imperium. Millions of religious pilgrims soon began making their way across the galaxy to visit particularly important religious locations, such as the worlds where a particular imperial saint had performed their most famous miracle. In time, the sheer number of pilgrims who arrived on certain worlds became an economic activity in and of itself, and an entire planet was dedicated to worship and directly ruled over by the Adeptus Ministorum, calling itself a shrine world. Particularly important shrine worlds would become the religious seat of an entire diocese, and so a cardinal would take up residency there. These planets became known as cardinal worlds. The only threat to domination of the ecclesiarchy was the Confederation of Light. Based upon the planet of Dimimar, this penitent cult's ideals of poverty, selflessness, and humble living clearly contradicted the teachings of the ecclesiarchy, whose view was that sacrifice of wealth and money to the Adeptus Ministorum in taxes, tithes, and other gifts were necessary to enhance the imperial citizens' access to salvation and to ensure that the Emperor's light reached every corner of the galaxy throughout his mission. In truth, the Confederation's theology directly opposed the efforts of the ecclesiarch and the cardinals in their attempts to ensure that the ecclesiarchy remained the wealthiest and most politically powerful institution of the Imperium. The Confederation proved too difficult for the Ministorum agents to infiltrate, and the ecclesiarchy at the time turned to violence. They were supported in their efforts by the unanimous vote of the Senatorum Imperialis of the High Lords of Terra, who declared the onset of the First War of Faith, largely to ensure that the imperial political stability was not damaged by the emergence of this religious plurality. The entire Confederation was declared heretical, and the forces of the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Navy, and thousands of fanatical zealots from the Fraterus militia were unleashed upon it, bent on its destruction. Only a few cells and hidden shrines of the Confederation managed to survive, and the power of the ecclesiarchy over the minds of men, for better or worse, was made unassailable. By the end of the 33rd millennium, every imperial world was furnished with its own cathedral, and the coffers of the ecclesiarchy were filled with the offerings and tithes from the teeming billions of God Emperor's faithful. This wealth was squandered by building additional, ever larger and more lavish churches and cathedrals, and to fund wars of faith intended not to save the souls of humanity, but to secure the ecclesiarchy's political power and wealth. What followed was the Age of Apostasy. If you want to learn more about the Age of Apostasy, Goj Van Dyer, and the craziness that happens after this, and really just how the Imperial Creed, or I should say the Ecclesiarchy, solidified itself as like the main power within the High Lords of Terra, check out our 40 facts on the Age of Apostasy. So go check that out. I posted it up on the channel yesterday. And yeah, thanks for listening, guys. I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate, signing out.